What happens when you assume? How do you think a sex and or gender lens like, what was it? Hormones and behavior. Have any of you taken that? It's like 342. Okay, so at the time I had Dr. Jens Prusner. Also, any of you heard of him? Oh, great, awesome. So he gave me a really nice way of thinking about sex and gender. He said, sex is between your legs and gender is between your ears. And I'm sure most of you already know the differences, but just to kind of clarify this a bit more, gender refers to socially constructed roles, behaviors, expressions, and identities of girls, women, boys, men, and gender diverse people. Sex, on the other hand, is your biology. It's the physical features, chromosomes, hormones, and anatomy that make you who you are. Any questions on that, or should you got it? Okay, great. So why does this matter for research? Well, every cell in your body has a sex, and every person is gendered. So your cells contain a nucleus. This is also very, very high level. I don't even know the intense science behind this, so please forgive me if anything is wrong. But your cells contain a nucleus that carries most of your genetic information, including your sex in the form of chromosomes. So XX is what makes someone female, and XY is what makes someone male. But there are other variations too. So for instance, someone might have an extra chromosome and have XXY instead of just XX or just XY. And that brings me to the next slide. Sex and gender are not binary. So what does this mean? Hands up, anyone have an opinion on that? What does it mean to not be binary? Yeah.
That there aren't only two options, there's not female and male, because both completely satisfaction.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So your gender may not match the sex that you were born with, and your gender may not fall into the traditional women-man binary. So I gave you an example of how sex can vary for people, and the same applies to gender. People may identify as a man or a woman, or they may identify as both or neither. It's really an individual choice and decision. Gender is a multidimensional concept. So some main categories that we can divide it into are roles. So these are behavior norms. How do societal expectations influence the type of role that you take on in your family or your job? It's also part of your identity. So we have two concepts here, cis and trans. Are people familiar with these terms? Okay, great. So cis just means that your gender identity aligns with your assigned sex at birth, and trans on a general level means that it doesn't or it may not. For some people, it also depends. Identity is fluid and can change over time. Gender is also about your relationships with others. Gender is a relational concept, meaning it isn't just about how you feel on the inside, but how you are treated and what privileges you are afforded by society based on how your gender is read by other people. Gender is also institutionalized. Gender bias, and sexism are also embedded in institutional policies and unwritten rules that people have to navigate in their daily lives, like in the work or at school, or in accessing healthcare and other government services. Institutionalized gender causes individuals to face stunning discrimination based on their gender. So now you're all experts in sex and gender, and I'm going to speak to you now about evaluating and integrating sex and gender in health research. So, a new UBC study conducted by Dr. Elizabeth Sagan has found that 1 in 5 lesbian teens who are sexually active say they have recently had sex with a male partner, yet only a third discuss using condoms. So the data used data from nearly 3,000 girls between the ages of 13 and 18 in the U.S. and found that lesbian and bisexual adolescents engaged in risky sexual behaviors at higher rates than their straight counterparts. Only about a third, so 32%, of lesbian girls discussed using barriers like condoms or dental dams with their most recent sex partner, compared to 62% of bisexual teens and 73% for straight girls. So why is there this disparity? This plays into gendered stereotypes about risky behaviors. Sex education should be taught in a way that is inclusive of LGBTQ2 students. So just for people who don't know, LGBTQ stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, or might think, this is all about straight girls, I don't need to listen. And then an opportunity arises where they might be having sex with a guy, and they're not prepared. The findings highlight that sexual orientation and sexual behavior don't always align, especially during the teen years, demonstrating a need for schools to offer comprehensive sexual health education that teaches all youth about safe sex practices. And it also needs to ensure, research needs to ensure that sexual orientation is not used as a category to simplify the complexity of sexual experience and identity. Moving on to another topic, so we're going to talk reported health for sex workers versus other respondents. Sex workers rank significantly lower for general and mental health, but higher for having unmet health needs. So why do you think that they feel they have higher unmet health needs? Any ideas? I know you guys have ideas. Yep.
They don't have access to.
Yeah. So access is one for sure. Yeah. Did you have your hand up? Okay. Yeah.
The stigma that they receive when they're trying to get access.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Fear of legal repercussions.
For sure, that's a big one too. Any other ideas? Cool. So in the study, some of the reasons why they did experience higher unmet healthcare needs, or they didn't get around to it, didn't bother, too busy, they disliked doctors and transportation. So you hit on some really good points, but when actually surveyed, I think the biggest one that links to all of the ones that you had mentioned were that they really dislike doctors. So the key message here is that obviously services need to be more accessible and sensitive to the nature of the kind of work that sex workers do. So yes, sex workers have a hard time with stigma and the healthcare system. However, research that includes sex and gender-based analysis shows that there is in fact a variety of reasons why sex workers get into the business. Through past studies, it has been discovered that reasons sex workers enter the industry not only contradict the public perception of being coerced or exploited, but also question the efficacy of prostitution laws that are all based on the notion that sex workers are victims. In fact, did you know that sex workers report a much lower rate of work-related violence than emergency room nurses? Makes you think about your career, eh, when you want to grow up. Cecilia Benoit's research team surveyed more than 200 female, male, and transgender sex workers in 6 communities across Canada. While a third of sex workers who were surveyed entered the industry due to critical life events such as abuse or neglect, a quarter found the work appealing. Some even responded that they were in industry to explore their sexualities and gender identities, and this is particularly found among male sex workers. So, in the study that was published by UBC on this, found that exploration of sexual and gender identity was a theme amongst male sex workers, with more than 70% of study participants identifying as a gender or sexual minority. So the point of this is that including analyses of both biological sex and gender identity allows for research that explores the role of gender stereotypes in the health of people of all genders. For example, stigma around female sex work can lead to increased violence or to laws that just don't work as well as they could for male sex workers, for instance. So examining these issues through a sex and gender lens increases the applicability of the findings and the chance that it could contribute to policies that actually make a difference and actually help people. All right, so now we know that it's crucial to measure both biological sex and gender experience, and this has traditionally been very much neglected in health research. However, there is increasing recognition that this is important and things are starting to change. But how do we do this? How do we collect information about sex at birth, lived gender, and gender identity? So these are key variables, and each of them can tell us something very different about a research participant. For example, if someone has a non-binary gender identity and was born female but lives in the gender of male, these could all be deeply relevant to that individual's health status and the way that they experience their life. However, adequately collecting data about and measuring sex and gender has been a challenge for researchers. So, there's a great researcher who is doing work on this, and her name is Greta Bauer at the University of Western Ontario. So she looked to evaluate different data collection tools for this exact issue, and she focused on trans people. So they represent 0.6% of the US population, but face many So we need trans-inclusive data in order to improve their healthcare experiences. But limited evaluation has been undertaken of trans-inclusive population survey measures for sex and gender, including those currently in use. So what she did was using an internet survey with 311 participants, as well as interviewing about 80 people. They conducted a mixed methods is just qualitative and quantitative, evaluation of 2 existing measures. So they looked at 2 different types of surveys and tried to find out which was more useful, which made more sense, which did people like better. So there was one that was this multi-dimensional one. As you can see, it asks a variety of questions about lived gender, sex at birth, if they've undertaken any surgeries for their gender identity or things like that. This was a multi-dimensional one. And if we look at this one, it's the 2-step one. Okay, so they're quite different. This one's a little bit more simple. So what's your current gender identity, and then what sex were you assigned at birth? So trying to see which one people liked better. Both measures actually performed reasonably well, but still had frequent problems for trans respondents. So the challenge in research is, how do you measure something fluid that's unique to each individual and is constantly changing for both individuals and at the societal level? So the conclusion that she got from this research was to propose a multidimensional measure of sex and gender. So 2 questions, 2 base questions on sex at birth and identity, and then the 3rd question on lived gender for participants whose gender identity differs from sex at birth. But the point is that there's no universal way to do this. It's going to highly depend on your research and what questions you're trying to answer. In order to design better surveys, ask yourself, what information is it that you need? What are you trying to measure? What are you looking for? And once that's been answered, how can you measure it? What's the best way? What's the literature out there? It may be that there's no perfect way to measure sex or gender, but we do know that science that considers both variables gets the most accurate information about study participants and how they experience gender, and that's what's most relevant. So, in conclusion, science is better with sex and gender. That was the whole point of everything I just said, so I hope you feel the same way too. It provides a fuller picture on how interventions impact different types of people, and it's important for understanding all human experiences. Okay, so here's the fun stuff now. If you want to learn more, this is where I give my pitch to the booth that we have at the back. So if you're interested in learning more about integrating sex and gender into research, there are a few options for you. The Institute of Gender and Health, which is where I'm from, has created free training modules, and at the end you get a certificate of completion signed by our scientific director. And it's actually a really good thing to add to your resume. I did it before I got this job because my old boss was like, it's really important to get these sex and gender training modules done. So now I have it at the bottom of my resume, and it's actually something really unique that employers are like, oh, what is this? Tell me about this. I am in research though, so it is a bit more relevant to what I'm studying. However, I think it can apply to everybody. We also have an SGBA, so that stands for Sex and Gender-Based Analysis Tools page, and this is an extremely comprehensive list of tools that anyone can access for free to guide you on how to integrate sex and gender in all types of research, and this ranges from biomedical mouse studies to population health surveys. We also have a newsletter that is distributed on a monthly basis, so you can find out about current news, research, and projects and events going on that are related to sex and gender. You can sign up for our newsletter at the booth behind all of your chairs at the back with Tasha. Please sign up. I promise you will not regret it. Finally, a great conference is coming up in May in Montreal, hosted by the Organization for the Study of Sex Differences, that you can all come to. So early bird registration is $240 for 3 days, and that's for students. And if you're someone who does research, you can try and convince your supervisor to send you to this conference. It'll be great, you'll have a blast, and you'll meet a lot of really interesting researchers, students, trainees, all of that. If you are involved in undergraduate research in a lab or anything like that, you can also submit a poster, and those are due April 14th. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of what our training modules look like, so there's 3 of them, and they cover different types of research. So there's the biomedical research, research with humans, and data analysis. Each module is 45 minutes. It really does not take that long, and it's free. You just create an account and sign in and complete them. Also, all of our materials are available in both English and French, so you don't need to worry about that. And like I said, at the end, you get a certificate of completion that's signed by our scientific director, and you can add that to your resume that you've completed the IGH training modules. I really recommend that you do them. Okay, so this is the organization, the OSSD conference that I just talked to you about. So it's going to be held at the Hyatt Regency in Montreal. You can join us for an exciting and diverse scientific program that will provide an opportunity for you to stay informed about the most recent advances in research and policy regarding sex differences in physiology and disease. So the 2017 program committee will be chaired by Dr. Anne Murphy, and the local hosts are Dr. Judy Cote and Jeff Mogul, who are both McGill professors. Have any of you taken classes with Judy Cote or Jeff Mogul? Okay, great. So you have no excuses to not pitch this to them. There will also be some great trainee events, like a networking lunch. So there's going to be a student social as well, and some really interesting presentations. So I really encourage you, if you can get a supervisor to pay for this on your behalf, attend the conference. It will be a great time. And it's in Montreal, so you just have to pay the registration fee if you're from here, which I think most of you are. And again, it's only $240 for students. Okay, so now I'm going to talk to you about the student network. So the objectives of the student network are basically to offer a platform for connecting with students and exchanging ideas and resources about the integration of sex and gender into health research. Also, as part of the student network, you advocate for the inclusion of sex and gender into health research, promote research and knowledge translation, offer information about sex and gender research and opportunities, and highlight recent research done by Canadian students that focuses on sex and gender and health. So being part of this, you learn a lot about this information. You can also get involved in organizing the student network if you're interested. So who is this network for? It's for undergraduate, graduate, postdocs interested in sex and gender health research, which all of you should be since it applies to all research. And it'll span the breadth of all health research, so biomedical, clinical, population health, and health services and systems. And this will be officially launched at the OSSD conference in May. So why should you be a part of this network? Well, it'll provide you a connection to CIHR and about funding opportunities and resources from CIHR. If any of you are interested in doing a degree beyond your bachelor's, which I feel like is more necessary now to get jobs, research is going to be something that is really helpful to be part of, and you will be applying for funding, and CIHR is probably one of the only places you will be applying for funding. So being part of a network gives you access to CIHR. It will also include regular learning opportunities, possibility of mentoring with top researchers, potential regional gatherings, and face-to-face meetings and conferences. And like I said, we're planning to launch at the OSSD conference in May. But there are also other ways to get involved if the network is not your thing. We'd love it if you filled out our nationwide student network survey. It'll give us an idea of what you're looking for out of this network because it has not been launched yet. So if you have input, you can fill it out. Please do. It's good karma if you're involved in research to fill out other people's surveys because hopefully you'll get better responses on your survey data collection. And it's also just really going to help us tailor the network to be the most useful and informative that it can be. You can also sign up for our mailing list and the newsletter at the booth. So we regularly send out funding opportunities and learning opportunities for students across Canada in all fields of health research. So if you're interested in research, like I've said a million times now, this is a good way to learn about the latest news, research studies, professors involving sex and gender. And for more information, please sign up to our mailing list and newsletter. It does not take long. Tasha's at the booth already to collect your emails. It's not going to spam you. It's only once a month or so. But it's a good way to stay connected and just in the loop about this kind of thing. And yeah, that's basically it. I'm going to be at the booth now for the next 20 minutes or so. So if you want, if you have any questions, you can come talk to me. But that's basically it.
All right, thank you so much, Safina. So we're going to take a couple of questions right now, if anybody has any. Shoot away. Yeah.
I was just wondering, what are your daily responsibilities when it comes to like the projects that you manage?
Yeah, so basically what do I do?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, well I just joined this institute 2 months ago. Previously I was with the Institute of Genetics actually. And what we do is we manage a lot, like personally I manage a lot of funding opportunities. So because one of our main goals is to integrate, researchers apply to funding opportunities that can be quite specific. So for instance, there might be one on mental health and depression specifically. So my job at Institute of Gender and Health would be, how can we integrate a sex and gender lens into this funding opportunity? So it's pretty like project management-y, and I go in and like I write stock sentences into these funding opportunities before they get approved and put onto the main CIHR website funding opportunities page. Other responsibilities. I create and do presentations, so that's one of the things I do. I'm trying to think, what else do I do? I answer a lot of emails. I have to brainstorm, but if you want, I can talk to you after. But the main thing that I do is work about integrating sex and gender lenses into all kinds of research, because really, every type of research that can be done can include sex and gender analysis, and that's the point. Other questions?
Was intersectionality at all included in the research that you mentioned? And if so, how did it affect the results?
Great question. So intersectionality is a new term that is now slowly being integrated into research. I'm not sure 100% if the studies that I did included them. Maybe they did. I'm sure it would have a pretty good impact on the results, just because, you know, race, economic status, all of this affects the outcomes of research and the experiences that people have. The focus for us, though, is sex and gender, so that's kind of the intersection that we take a look at, but I'm sure there are other factors that they consider as well. But this is a new term that is starting to be a lot more implemented. So actually a good example of this is there is a training module for sex and gender-based analysis for all governmental employees that is now being revised currently, and intersectionality is a new term that's actually being brought into those training modules for all of these governmental employees across Canada who have to take this. So, good point.
We have time for one last question. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you think there's a correlation between raising awareness for sex and gender integration to the number of total individuals that's starting to identify themselves as specific gender?
So do I think there's a correlation between the integration of these terms into research and the people who identify?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I think because our society as a whole is becoming more accepting and aware of the terms, there are people maybe who are coming out more. I don't know for sure, because correlation would have to be studied. I don't know 100%, but I would see that there's probably a pattern more of people coming out. I think gender identity has been a concept that's existed for a long time, but people probably did not feel comfortable. For instance, two-spirited, which is the indigenous concept of trans, has been around for hundreds of years, and they've always, recognized the fact that people don't necessarily identify in a binary. In Western society, this is something that's quite new. And I think that gradually, as people are accepting this concept, people are more comfortable coming out more openly, but again, have to be studied.
Thank you so much, Safina. Another round of applause. And just a reminder, they're going to be at the booth back there, so go ahead, ask your questions. They have some newsletters and cards that you guys can pick up to learn some more information. So we're going to give you guys around 15 minutes to do that before plenary, and then you guys can sit back in your assigned chairs. Thanks.
Can you cut it out of the stream? Can you start it up again?